Oh
Yo, yo,
yeah,
yo.
back online live on the Military Retirement Podcast, man. I feel like I look forward to this hour like all week because I'm just
Yeah,
like
really?
it just I really do, man. Like I write notes all week and I'm like, man, I can't wait to share this stuff. I can't wait to talk to the guests and I can't wait to talk to you, John, because I know we just mesh so well back and forth, man.
Yeah, in between the messages and then getting the coordination and even the days that we're trying to schedule things and we're scheduling them at the same time. And you're like, yeah, I just posted the thing. I'm like, yeah, I was just working on the thumbnail. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I think
hilarious.
my communication needs a little bit of work when it comes to that.
Nah,
But
you're good,
I'm
man.
I get so excited, huh, to do all this stuff.
That's right.
Um, no, man. So how's your week been?
Yeah, besides continuing to do the work thing, and we got some big things coming up in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be super duper duper busy. Just been getting through the week. Finally got a car delivered, so I got my race
Mm,
car here, so I can start tearing that thing apart.
your race
That'll be
car?
fun times. Yeah, my little race car from the States. I call it my race car. It's a little 2-seater car with a decent amount of horsepower. So
Hmm.
but right now it has 0 horsepower because it's in limp mode and it's dying a slow death. So I need to rip the engine apart and do some things to it. But it made it across the ocean and made it here safe, inspected. Everything is good, so it's legal to drive. I just got to get it drivable, and that'll be a whole nother thing. Probably starting in a couple months. I'm not going to make that a priority right now.
Very cool.
Um, what else is going on this week? Yeah, man, that's about it. Just running around doing things. Trying to keep everybody safe and healthy. I know my wife's kind of feeling under the weather and she's a little bit sick, so I've been running back and forth. So if you see me run out of the room, you know what's going on. I'm just taking care
No,
of my
no, it's
wife.
all good, man. Completely understand. Family comes first. Family comes
That's right.
first.
That's right. How about your week?
Um, my week, man, has been just a whirlwind of stuff. Just kind of throwing whatever sticks at the wall. It's like throwing spaghetti, and if it sticks, it sticks. If not, then I got to clean up a mess. So I quit my job this past week. I know we talked a little bit about that. I quit the job. Um, as you know, as we've talked about it before, I'm a DOD contractor working with the surface warfare community, a Navy position, and it's highly technical. I had to kind of going from the Marine side to the Navy side. I had no idea how technical the Navy was, so I had to kind of relearn a lot of stuff. And I got the job via my network. So it's kind of like, hey, look, you look like we read your resume. You look like you can figure some crap out. Let's get you on board. And I kind of went through the process, did some training. Got spun up on surface warfare, and there I was. And I feel like I got a good grasp on it. However, I just posted this video on the Green Logbook. Opportunity knocked so hard that I could not avoid it. I had to answer the call. I had to answer the door. So that's exactly what happened. After about 75 to 80 federal resumes that I had submitted, on top of other resumes, like submitting my resume on LinkedIn and Indeed, which I could not, nothing ever happened with those. Uh, I was able to get my foot in the door. And only after I talked to somebody at my job who had some knowledge about how USA jobs worked, and they walked me through the OPM. They walked me through a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I feel like I was doing it wrong all these months." So, yeah, I got it right, and then within about a month and a half, I got an email for a referral. I got 2 interviews done, and I got an offer for a position. I accepted the offer. We went into negotiations, and then I start next Monday, not tomorrow, the next Monday.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, it happened really quick, man. I was partly because they mentioned the new administration's coming on board. They don't know if they're going to have a hiring freeze, so they wanted to
Right.
expedite this stuff, and I was okay with that. But I've never had to put I'd never had to put a resignation in for like the last 20 years. It was always in the military. You accept your orders, and then you execute PCS orders, etc. I know officers can resign their commission. I've never done that. So I've never had to actually put in my 2 weeks for anything. So that was the intent with this job, put in my 2 weeks. But when I got the email saying, hey, look, we can't bring you on the end of the month. We need to bring you on next Monday. And I'm like, oh shoot, I can't put my 2 weeks in. It felt kind of crappy, right?
Yep.
But it is what it is. Opportunity knocked so hard I could not avoid it. So I told my boss, they're like, yeah, we're gonna have to expedite hiring somebody else. We have a lot of stuff coming up in the end of December, early January. So I'm doing a lot of turnover in this next week before I take off. But yeah, it has been just a whirlwind of stuff, man. From putting in my resignation to accepting the new job, um, dealing with family stuff. Just it has been a whole lot of stuff this week. But I feel like I'm starting the year off right, and it feels good to be able to do that. So it feels like new opportunities, new me, new chance to do something completely different. So I'm looking forward to it, man. I really am.
Yep. Yeah, it's good. You're locked in before the beginning of the year. Again, new administration, and then
Yeah.
you're going to be working towards a second retirement. You're going to start putting away in TSP again and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to get into a federal position. Because I know the TSP. I follow a bunch of TSP Facebook groups, and I know the ins and outs of that stuff. So I really wanted to get my foot back in that door. In the last year, I've not been able to, but I've been able to see my own TSP while I was active duty just kind of grow. But it was kind of like a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's going up, but I can't contribute to the thing, or else it would have went up a lot more.
Right.
So this time around, I get a chance to get back into the TSP. And the good thing is the new position is like 10 minutes away from home. It's actually across the street from where I used to work while I was active duty. So it's
Nice.
very, very cool, man. Very cool. So things are working out for the good, for the better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got two things I wanted to bring up. One real quick about the DOD SkillBridge program specifically for the Army. I don't know about all the other forces, but I just want to kind of put this out there. I get this email basically every week. It's called the S1 Net. And if you're in the Army, or if you're around the Army, or you work in a government job near the Army, and you want to keep in the know about things going on around the Army from the kind of HR perspective, and like if they update any pubs, or if they do any put out any new information, this email newsletter, if you just search S1 Net somewhere online, you can find it for the Army folks out there. But this is a MILPER message 24-486 for the SkillBridge, or Army Career Skill Program, DOD SkillBridge program. Individual internship approval authorities, issued 3 December 24. The purpose of the message is to provide an update regarding approval authorities for soldier participation in career skill programs, CSP, DOD SkillBridge programs, and individual internships. The first general officer or senior executive service equivalent in the soldier's chain of command will approve individual soldier participation in the CSPs, DOD SkillBridge, or individual internships that take 121 to 180 days to complete. No further delegation is authorized. CSP, DOD SkillBridge, or individual internship requests over 180 days are not authorized. So if you're in the Army, you're trying to do the SkillBridge thing, or you're looking into it, or you know somebody who is, that's the latest and greatest update for those folks out there who that may apply to. I just want to put that out there for sure.
Yeah, I've not seen anything on the Marine or Navy side. Normally, they would come out with like a nav admin or an ALMAR or a MAR admin. That's just how they put out updates to the forces. I've not seen anything like that. The last I heard is that they're tightening up SkillBridge, at least in the Marine Corps.
Yep.
When I had applied for SkillBridge, it was like, hey, you can just send up a request to your chain of command. It goes up to the CO. They approve up to, I think it was 6 months. A lot of folks were not getting approved up to 6 months. I didn't, when I submitted my SkillBridge packet, I didn't actually go that route. I just kind of walked it over to the sergeant major and the CO directly. Like I knew them, so I was like, "Hey, got this packet here. Let's approve this thing." And they just signed it on the spot. They're like, "Oh yeah, good. Here you go, Vic. You're
Nice.
good with my side." So that was nice, but I didn't actually. We talked about my SkillBridge journey. It didn't actually work out that well.
Yep.
So not as well as others. I'll put it like that. Uh, but yeah, no, that's good to know. I mean, that we're keeping up with all the SkillBridge stuff, pushing all that stuff out to the masses. I appreciate that, John.
Yep. And then there's one other thing, and I can't let the day go by without, like, I don't like to glorify and the crazy news that goes on out there. As many of you probably already know, Vic, I don't watch TV, I don't watch the news, I don't try to keep up with it. If it's so important, it'll definitely bubble up to the top and hit my radar. But other than that, I don't go out there searching for like, what's the sensational news going on today. But this thing right here has been bouncing around the internet, and it really caught my eye, and I just want to just bring it to the attention of the audience, just in case you're following VA news for any reason, or you want to know what's going on in the VA. This thing is kind of crazy. I'll just throw the article up here on the screen. You can read through it a little bit, but the gist of it is they started an investigation a couple months ago. They had some I wouldn't call it misconduct, but like sexual things going on in the VA with a bunch of the VA people who work at this VA medical center in Tennessee, Mountain Home, Tennessee. They did an investigation. They sent some letters up to the Secretary McDonough. They didn't get any information back. And then they sent some secondary letters up to try to get some details. I guess they just opened a full-blown investigation. They started finding all kinds of weird stuff going on. So, yeah, there's some strange things going on, strange things afoot in the Tennessee VA Medical Center there in Mountain Home, Tennessee. So you may or may not have heard of it, and this thing really caught my attention. And it's kind of interesting that it's right at the end here, as the presidency is about to turn over and the cabinet members and all that stuff's about to turn over, and this kind of just bubbles up to the top. Very, very interesting and disturbing as well. There was some pretty crazy stuff in here if you read through this article or any of the other articles out there. So yeah, just those folks in Tennessee, I would say be careful out there.
100%, man. Yeah. It's good to keep up with the news. And, I'm at work sometimes and I have some white space and I kind of find myself on these news channels, several, I mean, you can name them. I'm always kind of like comparing, contrasting what everybody's putting out. It's crazy what they're putting out, especially what's going on with the VA and all that, just, hey, stay up to date. I mean, even if you don't like reading the news, stay up to date on it because it could definitely affect you. And I mean, I've talked to folks who don't even know what the hell is going on. I'm like, hey, man, you might want to pop open that tab on your computer and check something out, man. Educate yourself a little bit.
Yeah, VA stuff I like to keep up with. The rest of the stuff I kind of let it go to the side. But when that kind of thing pops up as a VA thing, and it just blew my mind a little bit that that kind of stuff was going on. And when it's more than a few people, when it's a dozen people involved and it's been going on for a while, then that means there's a greater problem, probably higher up the chain somewhere. Somebody's letting that stuff slide. Somebody's letting that happen. Somebody's turning their eye to it. Something's happening. So,
yeah. But, well, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I digress.
It's all good, man. So along with this, I know we just touched on it, like navigating a new career, trying to figure out what exactly I want to do. I think our next guest, if you want to bring him on, if you want to introduce him, I think that he could probably educate me and everybody else out there who's listening on exactly how to find your next step in the next step in your career, in your life, and exactly what you want to do. So, John, I'll let you take it from here, man.
Yeah, Mr. Don Gleason, he's doing a whole bunch of stuff out there. You probably see him on the internet some way or shape or form, or if you're on LinkedIn and you're paying attention to job stuff, civilian job, meaning GS job, kind of education and things about how to create resumes and how to do the GS civilian to navigate that process and things like that. Definitely a coach doing some great things out there, and we wanted to bring him on the show so we could talk about some of this transitioning, getting into a new job or leaving a job and moving to a new career, as you just did literally this past week or this upcoming week. So yeah, we'll bring Don onto the show. Hey, Don.
Don, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Good to be here.
Morning,
I love
morning.
that conversation you guys just had. There's so much stuff. I was taking notes. It's like some of those things we're going to bring up because you just had some great material there, and I
Nice.
appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys today and talk not only transition but retirement. We should have our mind on retirement. Not that we have a foot in retirement, but be thinking about where we're going, right? Just like thinking into the next job.
Yeah, because it's going to happen. It's going to come. It's going to be on our plate at some point in time. It's going to happen. So you can't stay in the military forever, as
right.
I've always been told.
Mhm.
So you got to know what your exit strategy is. You got to know what your next step in life is going to be. So that's where you come in, Don.
That's right. And Vic, I want to push back on one thing you said, which was I haven't resigned in 20 plus years.
That's right.
The time that you decided to retire, you basically told the government, the military,
Yeah.
I'm resigning. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm saying goodbye. Right. So in some ways you did. You're cutting that cord like John just had. Right. So and I'm not trying to pick on the wording, but we all lead through transformations in our career. So it's good to think about those. I had a coach one time. I was talking about the second chapter of my life, and she says, "Is it really a second chapter, or is it just the next step?" And I thought, "Oh, that is so good. We got to talk about that, right? Because sometimes we think we're cutting it off and we're going totally a different direction, and some people do.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was just going to the next step. So." Yeah.
Well, there's lots of transitions in life. As you mentioned, life transitions, not only job stuff, but all kinds of other transitions, having children, having grandchildren, getting married, getting divorced, things like that. I actually want to touch real quickly, just briefly, on the bookends of your career, because I find it super, super interesting how you got into the military. And then as far as getting out on the back end, what you were kind of thinking about those last couple of years, if you could just briefly hit that for us.
Sure. I was thinking this morning as I went to church and I was coming back home, I was like, how am I going to introduce myself today? Right. Because you always talk about years experience, degree, all this stuff. I want to do something different. Right. So I'm glad that you did something different. When I think about why I got in the military, it wasn't because I had this lifelong ambition to be in the military. It was, I wanted to work in civil environmental engineering. Ever since the 5th grade, I wanted to work in that. I wanted to clean America's waters. I saw all that pollution. And in 1982, if you remember, it was the recession during President Reagan's first term. We're talking lately about inflation so high, interest rates so high. We were getting 18% interest rate on our savings back then because inflation was 15 to 18%. Unemployment was 14%. For the average, for the college students, it was well over 20%. In fact, only 18% of my graduating class had a job after 14 months. So I guess that makes 82% unemployment for my college class after 4 months. So I was looking around for opportunities. I knew I did not want to get a master's degree. I was sick and tired of school. I wanted to get in the real world. So we say, right? The real world. I wanted to go get experience. And frankly, nobody was hiring. I had 454 rejection letters.
Wow.
From different companies across America. So you can imagine how many, this is the day before computers, right? You can imagine how many we hand typed letters and sent them out just to get 454 back. You never get those today.
Yeah.
So the Air Force, I got an opportunity. Ended up being a snow day at the University of Wisconsin. They had a placement office, and I was supposed to interview with the Army on campus, and he couldn't get back because it was a snow day. So he called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to come to my office?" And I said, "Yeah." Now, both of my brothers had been enlisted in the Air Force, and they had good experiences, one better than the other, but it gave me a different perspective. My dad had been in Korea, so I certainly wasn't opposed to the military. It just wasn't my focus. But and I had some challenges the first couple of weeks getting my mindset straight as I went to officer training school and those things. So, I just jumped in that way. And it was interesting as I got in and got accustomed to it, it really became me. It fit me very well. Or maybe I should say I fit it. I don't know which way it was. Probably both. But that's how I got into the service. I don't know if you have any questions on that.
I mean, I just have one question, and this is something that I heard in a couple interviews that you've done, is the almost getting kicked out at day 2. If you could just touch on that real quick. That's to me, that's
day 2?
super fascinating. Day 3.
Yeah, day 3.
Oh, day 3. Oh, even
Yeah.
better. I got to hear this. Come on, Don,
Yeah.
spill it.
Yeah, it was my dream when I was in high school was to play in the NFL. And I was an offensive tackle. I made all conference my senior year. I was honorable mention my junior year. I got recruited. This is kind of funny. I got recruited by Harvard, a small little school in Iowa, USC, Southern Colorado, right? And not California. So didn't get recruited by the big schools, but we had a gentleman who got highly recruited on our team to Wisconsin, and that was a hometown. My dad worked on the campus, not as a professor, but as a he had his PhD, coming out of Korea, got his PhD through the GI Bill. But so I was really focused in on gaining weight. I remember my freshman year of college, the coach said, "You're at 210 now. I want you at 270 by spring ball."
Wow.
I'm like, how am I going to do that? Right. Back then, your walk-ons, you didn't have the meal table and all that kind of stuff. So I was full load of school. I was traveling back and forth an hour each way. And so I wasn't real disciplined on my diet because I didn't want to be. So when I left Milwaukee, my maximum was 236 and I was at 228. I thought, no problem. I'm in, doing good. Somewhere on the way to San Antonio, I lost an inch. And now my max was 230. And we spent 2 days just filling out forms and eating in the dining facility, right? You know how it is. So you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
And on day 2, I weighed in and I was at 230. And I thought, okay, I'm still good. Life is still good. Well, I got called in on day 3 and he says, we're going to weigh you in tomorrow morning at 7:20. I'll pick you up at 7:25. We're going to go down at 7:30. If you are at or above 230 pounds, you'll be on your way home by lunch. Am I clear? This was before A Few Good Men. And I thought, I said, "Sir, can I ask a question?" He says, "Sure." I said, "When I left Milwaukee, I was 6'5". My max was 236. How am I overweight now?" And he just said, "You're 6'4". Your max is 230. Are there any questions?" And I was like, I guess not. And on my way back to my academic room, I had to decide, am I going to stay in this craziness or am I going to use this as my out? And I didn't want to let my wife down. We've been married 6 months. Didn't want to let a lot of my friends' parents down who had been military. And they were going to, they had really talked a lot to me about how to survive military, OTS, et cetera. That it was a game. They're going to try to do different things to you, right? They want you to react. They want to see how you do things. And I said, no, I'm staying. So for the next 18 hours, I didn't eat or drink a thing.
Wow.
I went out on an 8-mile run that night around the track, quarter-mile track. That's what, 8 times 4? 32 laps. As fast as I could, sweat out as much as I could. Next morning, we had a 12-minute run. I ran as hard as I could for 12 minutes. And when he picked me up and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you staying?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "We'll see." And we walked. Of course, you're marching, right?
It's like Dr. Evil.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I get there and I get up on the scale, and he's standing about just to my right, a little bit of my peripheral vision. And the nurse is there and she sets it up at 230 and I get on and it, whoop, so I'm less than 230, it drops. And she starts sliding it over 228, 226, 224, 222. So I lost like 8 pounds in 24 hours because I didn't eat or drink a thing, right?
Wow.
I was sweating hard. Not healthy, but it made a commitment to me. And he looked at me, he goes, "Welcome aboard." And
Man.
we marched back and never really said a thing about it. I lost 28 pounds during officer training school. So I got that got that award. And but that really helped me set the intention, right? Vic, we were talking about, you set the intention to leave the military, right?
That's right. That's right.
That set my intention. I am staying in. I'm going to do whatever it takes. You are not going to kick me out. Not for something I can control. If I don't pass academically, I'm not good enough. I can't talk, so speak well enough. That's fine. But I'm going to give it my best shot. And
yeah, that's something you can control, definitely. Yeah.
Then oddly enough, that Saturday we went over to get our uniforms, and they said, "Hey, look how big this guy is. We got all these extra cotton fatigues. We'll give him those. Everybody else gets permanent press." So I spent an hour every day ironing and starching. And one morning in inspection, my flight commander looks at me and goes, "I was just in your room. The fatigues you," because this is before BDUs, right? The fatigues you have look great in your locker. These suck. Write them up. And I had just put them on like an hour before, but it was hot and humid, and it just. So anyway, it was a bunch of different challenges those first couple of weeks. And,
man.
And challenges, as we were talking this morning in church, right? We're going to continue to have trials and tribulations, and it's how you grow through them that is important. And we'll touch on to that, how it applies to transition as we get there. But trials are important. So I'm having fun pulling out those stories in my life and talking about this and how we work through them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because and we just had a comment here by your average logical thinker about being overweight and possibly not being able to accomplish those goals. And I resonated with that, exactly what you mentioned with the weight. When I was in E3, I joined in as enlisted. I was in E3 at one point, probably in E2 when I first checked into my first duty station, Camp Pendleton, California. We went in for a weigh-in, and I lost a bunch of weight in boot camp. I gained it all back, right? Because I was also a football player in high school, and after I gained all that weight, I'm like, what now? What happens now? I gained all this weight. I was probably about 260.
Ooh.
And and I lost a ton of weight just to be able to join. So I shot back up to about 225, 230. And my max, I think, was 203 for 6 feet, 203. So I had to lose all that. And so I was brought into the office by my leadership, told, "Hey, you need to make this weight or you're going to get separated." And I didn't know. I was a young guy. I didn't know. I was like, man, you know what? I don't want to get kicked out. I just got in, So I'm going to do everything in my power to avoid this at all costs. But I didn't know how the process worked, right? They actually have to put you on body composition programs and things like that. They don't automatically kick you out. So I lost about 26 pounds in a month to try to, stay in. I stepped up on the scale and my lips were all white. I was all super dehydrated. And they're like, "How'd you do that?" I was like, I was in the sauna and on the bike. It was just like in and out of the sauna, spitting into a cup, wearing the trash bags under, everything I could for like a month. And they're like, "Yeah, man, you could have died, dude." I was like, well, thanks for that. Just I appreciate you putting me through the rigors of that. But yeah, no, I completely resonate with that, man. Like, if you want to do something, if you want to stay in an organization, you got to do whatever you can to do that. And after about 20 years, man, I was just so tired of body compositions, because I'm naturally like a heavier person. I was so sick and tired of going through and doing the body compositions or the weigh-ins. And I'm like, you know what? 20 years is it for me. I'm good. Now I get to eat pizza.
There you go. Yeah.
Not all the time, but every so often.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm going through now it's the GERD diet, GERD. I'm having some throat problems, and you can hear me clearing my throat and stuff. So I apologize for that. But something I'm trying to work through right now. And they've got me on a 28-day purge. So it's like all the things I love. No dairy. I can have hard cheese, but no like soft cheese, pasteurized cheese, no milk. I can't have any chocolate. It's the caffeine. I can't have any coffee or tea or carbonated drinks. No alcohol. My daughter's here, and we love drinking beer together and trying different things. She's been here for 3 weeks. I can't have any beer. No. I've had a little bit. I'm cheating a tad. I can't have any citrus or citrus drinks. Right. So I'm on day, I think, 27. So what it is I'm going to get to slowly add some things back. So I had a little beer last night, and I said, I'm going to see how that works, right? So any of those things can irritate my throat. So I just have to now pay attention to what things irritate my throat, and maybe I have to get rid of. But it's that discipline, knowing that I did it at OTS, I can achieve a goal, and that helped me all the way through my career. So now I can know that I can do it here. It hasn't been easy. We just finished Halloween. There's a whole bowl of chocolate sitting down there.
And Thanksgiving.
It just had Thanksgiving with the pie. I can't have pumpkin pie. I love pumpkin pie. It's like, so it's, but being healthy is a challenge.
Yeah, willpower is definitely a thing, and
That's
I
right.
find myself, I don't have very much willpower when it comes to stuff like that. I have a big sweet tooth, so and the wife loves to bake, so
Yeah.
there's always brownies and breads and stuff all over, on the weekends, Sunday mornings, and I can't avoid that stuff. So
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
helped me is I did it with MyFitnessPal, and now I'm doing it with Fitbit. Is I'm loading in everything I eat, and just the fact that I have to think about it and add it in and see the calories, see the fat, see all those things. Sometimes I walk out in the kitchen and I start to grab something. It's like, nope, that's not going to
Maybe
fit
not.
today. Yeah, and I love to buy a brownie like at Panera, and I'll cut it into like 8 little squares, and I'll have one every day for 8 days. So it's like 40 or 50 calories. I get the joy of eating it,
Yeah,
but I don't splurge with a 400 calorie brownie,
yeah.
or 600 calorie brownie. So it's just
You know what-
tricks you have to do to keep yourself in the game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was stationed in Japan, down the street from me was a 3-story bakery, and they had, if you know how the Japanese work, they love to take like Italian desserts, or they love to take French desserts, and then they make it all nice. They displayed it very well. And so like one floor was Italian desserts, one floor was French, the other one was German. It was just like different countries on every level. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get away from here. I got to get out of here, man. I'm, my tray, because you have to fill up a tray and then go pay for it. It was completely full. I'm like, no, I can't do this, man. The willpower is overwhelming. I can't do it. So yeah, I completely get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. My name is Don Gleason, and I am a chocoholic. I'm with you, Vic.
I will add my name in there as well. Vic
Yeah.
Delafleur. I'm a chocoholic. Yeah.
So the interesting part then of the bookend, as you asked John about getting out of the service, was I wanted to get some experience for 4 years and get out. I didn't have any inclination I was going to stay for 20 or 27 that I did.
Right.
But so this is where I was thinking in church, where I was going to introduce myself. I'm an SC on the DISC personality assessment. So I'm a very teamwork oriented, collaboration oriented. I second guess myself before I make the decision and after I make the decision, right? I'm all about making people happy. I'm a satisficer, right? So it's all those different pieces. And what I found in the military, my first assignment, we were up in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan. We had a great group of people, and it was so much fun getting to know. We had like 15 lieutenants. Today, you might have 1 or 2. In fact, for the last 20 years, you might have 1 or 2. But back then, we had 15 lieutenants. And we did things on the weekends. We went skiing together. We went tobogganing. We went water skiing. We just got together and had a party. It seemed like we're always together. And so that collaboration piece really felt good. I felt a part of the military, and I connected with my boss. I connected with the civilians at work. It just really felt good. So when I got the opportunity at 3.5 years, I wanted to go to Europe, but they reassigned me to Cheyenne. I got into another really good group. And then I went to Bitburg, Germany, finally, at the 6-year point. I had two months notice to make it all happen. That was a little challenge. It was supposed to be a month. They gave me 2. But again, another great group. So from my personality perspective, I just loved the group, and I just kept staying, and I loved the jobs I was getting. I loved the culture of the military. It all just fit. So as I came up on 20, I started thinking, should I get out now or should I keep going? And I kept getting great opportunities. I mean, as I made 06, I got to go to Baghdad and worked reconstruction of the country. $12.8 billion program. You know, we were rebuilding the water systems, the electrical systems, the oil systems, the security and justice facilities, the education facilities, the hospitals and the clinics, and the transportation, the communication, all of that. So I had my hands in it as the deputy director of programs. And it was just so satisfying to see the impact we were having on a country, to rebuild and give them hope. The last slide in our presentation was, you know, we do this for the kids of Iraq to give them a better future. And you had kids, you know, in the picture around it. And it just really made you feel good. It was that role that satisfied me inside. But I knew that it wasn't going to last forever. And I kind of got to the top. I really wanted to be the chief of environmental for the Air Force. I got to be the chief of readiness, the environmental position. They made a civilian. And I put my name in for it, but they didn't advertise it until I was already out. In fact, I was 6 months out, 2 months out before they advertised it, 6 months out before they picked it. And I was already in San Antonio. I was already in with Booz Allen. I said, I'm good. I'm staying. I felt comfortable with Booz Allen. Mm-hmm. And go back to DC. I was tired of that traffic. So, yeah. But so all that to say, I was probably in my career transition out of the service for 24 years. I was still focused on the job I did every day, but I was always thinking about, when am I going to get out? What do I need to know? What do I want to do? And I knew it wasn't design. It wasn't construction. It wasn't facility maintenance. I did those. I got awards for it, but it wasn't why I was staying in the military. I stayed in because I got to do environmental work and emergency management work. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to do, getting outside. That's where I saw my future. Going all the way back to the 5th grade, like I said earlier, the first Earth Day, cleaning America's waters. I wanted to get back into that again. And Booz Allen gave me that opportunity.
Very nice. And then how does that, so right now you help folks figure out what they want to do. Mm-hmm. How did you transition to that? How did you find out that is where you wanted to be?
It was through my time in the military. You know, leaders don't just direct people, right? Leaders, you get to, you cast that vision, you communicate the vision, you connect that vision to your people, you help motivate them, you inspire them. To truly motivate and inspire people, you have to get to know them, right? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their desires? What are their challenges? And through getting to know people, I've had a number of conversations with folks. I'm going to go back to one story. It goes back to weight. And something I had to do in the military to stay underweight was I was constantly changing my diet, right? Went from 2 pieces of bread to 1 piece of bread. I went from like roast beef to lean ham, right? I went to 4 or 5 cookies to 2 cookies a day. You know, no potato chips. You know, I just had to constantly keep modifying my diet to be able to stay underweight. It was a constant thing. And I was given an Article 15 at one point, like you said, Vic, the program, right? You go through X number of unsatisfactory checks. And at some point you get an Article 15 because they're starting to walk you out the door. Mm-hmm. I looked at the guy and I said, explain to me why we're here. What's not working right? How are we not helping you? And he goes, sir, can I speak freely? And I said, yes, sir. I closed the paperwork. I said, certainly. Let's have a conversation. He goes, I have a hard time taking criticism on my weight from somebody who's so skinny. And I was like, that's kind of an interesting comment. And I said, can I tell you my story? And I told him what we just talked about with almost getting kicked out and how I've had to modify my diet and I'm at the gym every morning and all these different things. And I said, you think I'm skinny? I'm only about 5 to 7 pounds underneath my max. And he says, I didn't know that. You just look so slender. I said, because I'm 6'5", I don't get as much per inch. Yeah, right. So he said, wow, you motivate me. Thanks for sharing that. So I took that and a number of other stories where I sat down, built a relationship, helped people. That same guy, we had another year and a half later, he had another Article 15 for using a computer improperly. You know what that means. And we talked about that and we ended up holding his stripe back. But the guy, through our conversation, we got him straightened around, working with a supervisor, working with a shirt. And before I left, I was able to not only get him the suspended stripe back, but also he made the next level. So just helping people on the right path. So that's a long story to say. I'm connected to my military peers, and to see them frustrated and depressed and challenged so much in their transition out of the service, just get compelled to help them. I became a John Maxwell team member. John C. Maxwell, he's written over 90 leadership books, right? So I was on his team, and we're down at the certification event. I was back as an alumni. This is like my 4th event. And I was really trying to figure out my target client. Is it companies? Is it military transition? And I took a 2-hour break during our afternoon, and I walked out to the pool, and I sat here and I said, I'm not leaving until I figure this out. And I just got into prayer, and I started thinking, and I had a piece of paper, pros and cons. Of course, I was drinking a beer, pros and cons. And I came back to military, and I just walked back in and said, okay, this is where I'm going. And the success just flourished. I was struggling on the corporate leadership side, but on the military side, what I'm saying to the people that I work with is resonating with them, and is helping a bunch of people. I've helped over 207 people in the last 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
I just want to keep doing it. I love it when they get into a job and they call back in 6 to 12 months and say, man, I'm really loving it. What you said here really helped me with this. Right. And so that was
Don,
kind of my transition why I'm here.
What is the hardest thing that you see, or the most common thing that you see that people are having trouble with as they transition from military to civilian?
So that's a tough question, because there's a number of them, but I think it all comes back to not being clear on what you want to do. Because when you don't know what you really want to do, you're not networking with the right people. You're not applying to the right jobs. You're not building your LinkedIn that really talks about those experiences and skill sets, and talk about why you want to get into that, right? LinkedIn is more than a resume. A lot of people take their resume, cut and paste it in, and it's like a duplicate. It's not meant to be that way. LinkedIn is meant to be that opportunity for you to tell the future employer, future networking person, right, why I'm in this business. In my about section today, I talk about 22 military and veterans taking their life, career transition being the number one stressor per various studies, the number one ideation, and how I feel compelled to act in that area. And here's what I see, right? So that's about me. You're not going to see that in the resume. So they don't get a good resume, good LinkedIn. They don't have a good resume. They don't have a good elevator pitch. It just, I think, all comes back to knowing what you want to do. And I go back to when in July of 2008, and I went through the executive TAP program, and she gave us this sheet, it was like 2 pages long. Here's a bunch of questions I want you to go through tonight and really think into those. And I did. I spent 4 or 5 hours in my office at home. Do I want to supervise or not? Do I want to work inside or outside, right? Do I want to be an individual contributor or supervisor? Do I want to be a business development guy? How much do you want to travel? And just all these different questions in all kinds of different ways. And I really thought into it. And I got really clear on what I wanted to do. And in May of 2009, I went to this Society of American Military Engineers Joint Engineer Training Conference. And I'd already let a lot of my network connections know I was getting out. That happened in December of 2008. Now was the opportunity where I'm really starting to interview. And I had a bunch of my peers tell me, oh, Don, you need to get this construction job over here. Talk to these guys over here on design, or talk to these guys on facility maintenance. You can get a great job. You'll make more money than environmental. And I said, I didn't pick environmental because of the money. It was the lowest one of all the engineers, which is still pretty good, but it was the lowest of the engineers. I'm about impact. And that's what I care about. So I got in with Booz Allen Hamilton. I interviewed with Answer. I interviewed with one other company, but I was very clear on what I wanted to do, and they knew exactly what I was looking for. And I had the network connections to get me in and get me the interviews. So it went very well.
When you were interviewing for those different jobs, and I really, really, really love the fact that you, in your path of searching for a job and searching for your next career, after the military, which actually ends up being the initial career that you wanted to do in the very, very beginning. That the purpose behind it is not motivated by money, it's motivated by impact. So I wanted to ask, in the course of those interviews for those 2 or 3 jobs that you interviewed for before you settled on Booz Allen, I believe you settled on Booz Allen.
I didn't settle. They were a great pick. They were a number 1 pick, but go ahead. Yeah.
Right. Before you decided Booz Allen was the top pick of choice. And again, that's very intentional how you say that, because you said you picked, they didn't pick, like you made the decision. In those interviews, how were you able to articulate not only the skills coming from the military and from your background and from your degree, but also articulate to them in such a manner that they understood that that you knew exactly what you wanted? What were some of the things that you maybe could pick out of that interview process, if you can go back and rethink it?
Yeah.
Some of the things you said, some of the phrases you said, or just your posture, your demeanor. How did you articulate that to them, or what you wanted?
Yeah, the key thing was, there's a lot of recruiters today say be authentic. And I thought I was authentic because I would let them know, not just, it's like what I ask for people in a resume today. Don't just give me what you did, right? I was responsible for leading this study or leading a team doing this, right? They want to know, what was the real challenge? What was the problem? What did you solve? How did you figure out how to do this, right? And what was the result? And I remember I went out to dinner. This was at that Joint Engineer Training Conference I was just mentioning. We were in Salt Lake City, and we went out to dinner, and there was 5 of them around the table and me, and we spent 4 hours there. And they kept asking me questions. At one point, I would swear they had 3 questions backed up that I was trying to answer. And I wasn't giving them just the short, sweet answer, right? I was giving them a little bit of the context and why this was important and why this was motivating me, right? Because they asked me, I can't remember the exact questions, but tell me a little bit about that challenge you had in Iraq. Your performance report, your resume talks about definitizing contracts. What is that? Right. And I went back and I talked about this one morning when this guy walked in and he said, "Sir, I've got a $50 million change order. I don't have time for you to ask me any questions. I just need you to sign it." Right. And I told him straight up, you can either sit down and give me 5 minutes or you can go find somebody else. But I'm not going to answer questions for this later on and say, you just signed it blindly? No way. And so it gave them insight into who I am as a person, what my values are, and because it's integrity, right? It's accountability, and in that situation. So my wife told me at one point, she says, maybe you had 3 questions backed up because you were talking too much, right? But it went really well, and they were all staying engaged, and they were asking the next question, and so I would say it was about being authentic. It was about letting them see inside of me, like LinkedIn, right? Let them see inside me. Who are they hiring? And this isn't just Don Gleason, an engineer who can do environmental work. This is a leader who solves problems, who builds relationships, who's driven by these things. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. I love it so much that you are able to articulate that in such a way. And it seems like, and this is just my observation of it, and also it's kind of the way I operate whenever I do interviews as well. It's not so much about going in and like answering all the questions correctly and telling them what they want to hear. It's more about me transmitting my values and my beliefs across in such a manner that shows them that what I'm doing or what I want to do is based on my values and what I think is right, no matter what the person coming to the desk and saying, "Hey, can you just pencil whip this real quick?" Like, no, let me read through it. Let me actually read all the bullet points and see what's going on. Let's have a conversation about it. So I love that. That's 100%. Would you actually say that maybe like job skills versus integrity and value-based kind of thinking, weighing those two together, which one would you put more weight on?
I think because I was a mean, I'm coming out as a colonel, right? So I'm moving into a senior associate position with Booz Allen, and they made it clear that most colonels coming out become an associate, and then they changed it around so it became a lead associate. They split associate into 2 levels. I was coming in at a higher level, which would be bonus eligible, right? Considered part of the senior leadership team of the company. Now, company had 25,000 people, so it's not like I was right near the top. You're working with the CEO, right? But because I was coming in as a senior leader, they were looking for those more intangible skills, the soft skills, right? They felt really comfortable that I had the technical skills. They could see that in the resume. They could see it when we talked. They were really assessing how I was going to work with the client, how I was going to work with a team building proposals, right? How I was going to be able to manage finances on projects and all those different pieces. And I was able to give them those stories of how I was going to do that. So I think it was more the soft skills. It's building the relationships, working together as a team. And about 2 or 3 years in, we happened to be sitting we were at a conference in Florida, and we were sitting with my two of my principals that I worked for. And they looked at me and they got me a beer and they said, "We just want to celebrate that we made the right choice."
That's awesome.
I was like,
great.
"Tell me a little bit more. What do you mean?" I said, "You haven't ever pushed back. You never said that no jobs below you, but you build a team, you get the job done. I was at that point, I had won like every project I got involved in. It was the boss taught me well. I was asking a lot of questions. I was learning. So that's a whole nother story we'll come back to.
No.
Yeah, those soft skills are essential. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Recently, when I had the interview, the second interview was just a talk back and forth. It kind of got me off guard a little bit because the first interview was just so structured. The second one was just them getting to know me. They wanted to know my personality. They wanted to know basically if I mesh well with the team.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I didn't catch on until after. I'm like, okay, well, this is not really an interview. It's just, they're just asking me questions. Hey, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What would you do in this situation? And, within 3 hours, after that interview, I got a call back. Hey, we like your personality. We like what you had to say. We think that you're a good fit for the team. We'd like to bring you on board. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense, right? It's like talent management. You don't want to have somebody who's just technical, and doesn't mesh well. It doesn't play well with others. You want to have them as part of a team member. It makes total sense.
Yep. And 2 days later, the conference was over the next morning, and that afternoon I flew. So this is the next day of that dinner. Flew down to San Antonio, got in like at 10 or 11 o'clock, 7 o'clock the next morning. I was on with the leaders in the company, the vice president, number of principals and senior associates I'd be working with. So I had interviews every hour for 8+ hours and repeating a lot of things, right?
Wow.
But each one was really assessing how I'm going to be able to work together with them. Now, most of them were colonels, retired from the Air Force, civil engineers. We had known each other. Some of them I didn't know, but I knew of. So we had that commonality. And I thought when it was done, it was really well. And in fact, at the end, the one gentleman looked at me and he goes, it's just like 3:15. He goes, "Don, I just got to be honest with you." He says, "I only got like 15 more minutes. So we're going to do half hours instead of an hour." He says, "If you're okay with that, because I got some kids that got to get some stuff done." And at that point, after 7 hours, I was beat. And I was like, "Nee, not a problem at all. Family is the most important. You ask me the important questions that you need to ask me. You've got 7 hours of other people asking questions. I'm sure you guys are going to talk. If you want to get back on the line later on, let's do it." So I was touching that personal side of him and taking the stress off, because you could see he was stressed. He was going to cut me off on a half hour, but he felt he needed to give me an hour. And I was like, no. Post-military, it's all about balance, harmony.
It is.
You do not feel guilty.
It is.
And that's what I loved. Sorry, that's what I loved about Booz Allen.
Uh-huh.
They were very much into, like when I asked the boss one time, I said, where does it you want me to work? You want me to work in the office? You want me to be here? I said, because sometimes there's not enough people here for me to justify me driving down. And he said, because that was about 30-minute drive. And he goes, "Don, you work where you think you need to work for the day." If there's meetings here and you need to be in the room, do it. If you can do it on the phone from home, do it. Because I would go in sometimes and the principals would all be in DC and my peers would all be out at, across America on their job site. My team would be down on the government site on base. On base. And I was all by myself. There's a lot of people I didn't know, but they weren't my team. And it's like, well, I would drive down, spend 8 hours in my office, door closed on phone calls, and I would go home. I was like, why am I doing an hour travel for this, right? And Booz Allen was just awesome about it. So you work where you need to work.
That's such a great answer. It really is, because it gives you the freedom to choose how you can work as effective as possible. There's been so many times where I've had to go in the office and it's like, why am I even here? For one, there's nobody here. For two, I can probably do the same thing at home. So, from the comfort of my own home, I can probably get more done. That's great.
Yeah,
I love that.
This return to office push has a different perspective for me, because this was 10 years prior to COVID and all of this. And they taught me how to do this, right? Work where you need to work. And I saw something the other day of, I don't want to get political here, but Ramaswamy and Musk saying that one of the problems they're going to solve is 75% of the government people in DC are still working from home.
Yeah.
And my question was, so what? Are they as effective and efficient? Do they have a better quality of life? Are they more inclined to stay with you because of it? Why is that a big issue? That's not a reason to get rid of people. But I guess when you're just looking to cut heads, that is one of the.
I did read a couple of things about that. There's like somebody had posted some of their story. I forgot the news site that they had a job in DC, but because DC was so high cost, they moved over to like Tennessee somewhere, bought a house out there, settled their family out there. And now that they're going to be potentially cut off, they either have to move back to DC or like uproot their whole family, move back to DC, or just, travel back and forth. It causes an issue, and potentially this person had mentioned, hey, look, I'm doing my work effectively from the comfort of my own home. A lot of times, I'll even do it after hours because I'm there. The computer's there for me. So they really have to take that into consideration. Yeah. Without getting too far into that, but I can see a lot of things changing, and that's part of the reason why I was also brought on to this new position, because things are going to be changing with the federal government here so shortly.
Yeah, exactly.
So go ahead, John.
No, I was going to ask if we can switch around to, I guess we can kind of link these together. There are actually three of them, but resume stuff in general, resume stuff on LinkedIn, and resume stuff for government civilian positions specifically.
I have a specific question with that, Don.
Sure.
To kind of piggyback off that, tailoring the resume. If you can give us some insight on tailoring, and just some background information, some context for the group, everybody listening. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I submitted about 80 resumes, and a lot of them at the beginning were just catch-all resumes, which were not tailored. And I think that was a big reason why I was not getting any callbacks. Submitting the same thing for different positions that required different things. I was reading the job description, but it wasn't really registering. I'm like, okay, well, this can touch on that. This can touch on that. And at the beginning, it was just taking my fitness report and applying that to my resume. And not until I got some kind of guidance, things started to make sense. So if you can kind of touch on that, on tailoring the resume, I would love that. Yeah.
I'm just finishing writing a digital course and working on my slides, and I'm going to be releasing this hopefully in January, early February. So I'm excited. Cool. It's about targeting a resume. And you got to remember that a resume is not remember we call it a CV, right? A vitae. It tells everything about you, and it can be as long as you want it to be. A resume for a job application is a 2-page max about how you qualify for that job. If you're networking, you make a 1-page with the real specific highlights, but it still goes back to what we said earlier, targeted. You're targeting for a certain position. I was working with a colonel, and he wanted to do 2 things. So he created 2 different resumes,
Mhm.
one for working physical security in facilities, and one working as an ROTC instructor. There was a number of things that were the same, but there was a lot of things that were different, and how he couched them were different because the requirements were different. I just went to a job fair a couple weeks ago, big red, white, and U job fair here in San Antonio, and particularly for military, but a lot of non-military were there. So the city of San Antonio, the county of Bexar County, the military bases were there, nonprofits were there, corporates were there. I mean, it was about at least 100 different organizations hiring. And I took my time walking around asking the question, what are these guys missing? What would you tell them so that they can get their resume past the first gate? And the 2 things they said really resonated. One, you got to read the job advertisement more than just skimming it. Hey, yeah, that's something I want to do. My resume will work. Boom, apply. You got to read it and tailor your resume. That's the second piece. Tailor your resume to show that you meet those things. He says, she says, they said, what happens is I pick up a resume, right, and I look at it, and I'm thinking in my head, I got to have this degree, I got to have this certification, I got to have this year's experience, I got to have these skills, and nothing on that top part of the resume in the summary or the skills section shows that that's what this person is. So it gets tossed. If you really want that job, you got to be explicit right up front. I was working with a gentleman last week, and not to pick on him, but I had to ask him. So I very rarely do a resume review anymore without knowing the job advertisement that you're applying for, because I need to see how they match. Yep. So the resume looked good, but I didn't know how it matched. So he sent me the advertisement, the link, and I looked, and I was like, I spent like 10, 15 minutes. I can't find a connection on these key things that I think they're looking for. And he had to go through and pull out pieces. Well, on page 2 in this line, it really talks to that. And on page 3, I was like, if I have to work that hard and you have to work that hard to explain it to me, it's not tailored. It should be very apparent. I use an idea called above the fold. Right? Think about the day yesterday was Pearl Harbor Day, right? Think about the next day, top of the newspaper, right? Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, pictures of USS Arizona and others burning, right? Story below, and it cuts in. Above the fold, that picture got people interested to buy the paper. Your resume is kind of the same thing. That summary statement and the skills should be so particularly written to the job advertisement that when the hiring manager or recruiter picks it up, it's like, that's the guy. That's the guy or gal, excuse me. That's the person. That's the one that we want, right? Got the right experience, got the right, it's not just the degree, the certifications, but it captures some of the pieces that they're looking for off the advertisement. You've got to make it so that they want to read the experience down below, right? Turn inside the newspaper. They want to read the bottom part, and then they walk away with like, I need to talk to this guy more. It's not trying to get to a minimum requirement. This is trying to show that you are it. So when we say, like we said earlier, a lot of military are coming in. If they would just interview me, I could show them. But the resume, remember, is the ticket to the interview.
Yep.
You can't show that you're qualified because I got 200 of them. You got 200 on average per job. So they got, depending on how they do it. Now, it's important. So here's another piece. It's important to understand how the company processes it. We were in 4-block, and I was a readiness coach for 4-block for 4 semesters, and Verizon was there. And this young lady in the back, we were on Zoom, and she jumped up and said, I'm really frustrated. I have put in like 30 applications to Verizon, every job I qualify for, and I never get a call back. And he asked one simple question. He was the head recruiter, and he says, ma'am, what day during the open period do you put it in? And she goes, well, the last day, because I'm always perfecting it and tweaking it and trying to, interviewing with people and trying, talking to networking with folks, and I was trying to make it better. And she said, ma'am, with our process, that's exactly the problem. We take the top 15, we go forward, and if we get 15 that are good candidates, we can take the interviews. The other 185 never get looked at. And you're on the bottom of the pile, first in, first out. She says, I'm sorry, but that's just the way we do it. And she was going to get mad. He said, ma'am, it's just the way we do it. You have to understand how companies walk through the process. right? Some use the bots to review, some don't. Some have human. Some, some may take the top 50 and try to find the best. Some look at all 200 to try to find the best. Amazon is looking for very specific things. Because when you get into an interview with them, if you don't touch all the core values of Amazon in your interview, you're out, right? So you have to show that you have done that. And you got to kind of do that. If you're applying to Amazon, you got to do it in your resume. So you got to understand the process, but then you got to answer the mail. How do you qualify? So that'd be the two top things I would probably say. I probably said more than two, but that'd be the top two things.
I've seen that on USA Jobs when they announce we're going to look at the top 50 that apply and everybody else will be looked at after. They specifically put it up there for some job announcements, which I didn't realize until I saw that and until you explained it. I didn't realize how that worked. I thought, if they're looking for everybody, maybe they're looking at the first 200. If you submit it on opening, when the job position opens, you're going to have a better chance at getting looked at. I thought they just looked at everybody. I'm glad you clarified that.
I would have thought the same thing too, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm an SC. I said I'm an S, but I'm an SC personality. So my C is very compliant, very analytical, right? I want to know everybody who applied. I hired for when I was the mission support group commander at Offutt, my second to last assignment. I was hiring a deputy, GS-14, and I had to sit down and really think about, as we put it out, what am I really looking for? And then I got 83 resumes. And I was doing this on a Sunday afternoon after church. And I said, I got until dinner to make this happen. And I started looking through. I was like, every one of these guys is great. But what am I looking for? I'm looking for the person who is ready to move from a 14 to a 15. He's going to be the future leader, right? He's going to move into these kind of positions. He's got to have this kind of background. He's got to have this kind of experience. And there was a retired Chief Master Sergeant services guy who met every one of those. So I culled it down within about 2 hours down to my top 10. And then I picked 5 to go to the interviews with within the next hour. So within 3 hours, I did it. But it was that same thing. Do they have these? No. Do they have these? No. So that 6 to 8 seconds was so true. Yeah. And so that was government side. And these were 7, 8 pages, right? Because USA Jobs, you can go as long as you want. But I knew what I was looking for. I didn't get confused with all the extra stuff.
Yeah, I actually literally just sat down with my wife the other day and we did the same kind of process for a job and an application to a job on base. And she was going through her CV and pulling things out of there. And she started writing things. I was like, go ahead and write down what you want to write down. And then we'll go back through and sit back through it again. And I started to look at it and I was like, you should take this out. You should reword this. You should do this. And she started asking me why. And I was like, well, if you look at the job and the job description and what they're actually looking for, what requirements they need, does this actually feed into any of those requirements that they're looking for? And if it doesn't, then you should get rid of it. If it does, and maybe it's worded differently, maybe it's the same kind of thing, but in a different kind of context, then just reword it or realign it to meet that context of that job description. And that's basically how you can go about doing it. I didn't know about the 50 in, 50 first in, first out thing either. And on the back end of that, I would say, like, that's one of those things that you mentioned in the beginning, like you're not in control of that. If you can find that information out, if they publicly, put that information out there from the company's perspective, cool. But otherwise, like, you're not in control of that. You just gotta take it with a grain of salt and keep moving with it, right?
Which I think you're 100% right, John. And I think that's why the networking piece is so important. If you know, let me say it, that's why knowing what you want to do is so important, because when you start getting interested, you're starting to network, and you got to network with the right people, the right places. You don't go to a network event to try to find anybody who has a job. I mean, you can do that, but then you're going to take a lot of work to write your resume to get in. But you've probably already worded at least a master resume targeted toward the typical type jobs that I want to go after. And then I go network, and I want to get into Booz Allen, say. I'm just reading that comment.
Oh yeah, we got a comment from Matt Woods.
Yeah.
For everybody listening to the podcast, says, was recently told on USA Jobs when positions are listed for a short period, 9 times out of 10, they are hiring within. All jobs must be listed by law.
Yep.
Yeah, if you can give us some insight on that, Don.
No, it's just a true statement. I don't know if there's anything more I can add to it. It's just true. It's frustrating. You apply for it, you start putting your resume in for it, and you kind of know that you're probably not going to get picked. So, but you go back to understanding the network. If it's a government job and I want to go work in, say, Air Force Civil Engineering at the Pentagon, I need to find some people on LinkedIn who are working at the Air Force Civil Engineer at the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. And I need to understand, find a connection that understands the process so that I can comply with the process. If they say, yeah, we pretty much, they can't say we already know who we're going to go after, but you can get the feel. Yeah, you can get the feel that, hey, when there's short time frames, we've got to move through it. We've got a short list already. Whatever they can tell you, got to read between the lines. Mm-hmm. If it comes out a second or third time, they're not finding the right candidate. They don't have somebody, and they're not finding somebody. So when I applied for GS-14, it was when I was the colonel, chief of readiness at the Pentagon for civil engineer, in my emergency management section, we were going to convert the lieutenant colonel to a 14. So I applied for that because I was trying to stay there long enough to get that chief of environmental, right? So I was trying to use it as a stepping stone. And they called me up and said, they gave me some different things. It was probably not right what they told me, but really wasn't the job I was looking for. And by that time I had an offer from Booz Allen and I was already getting ready to move. So I didn't fight it, but bottom line was they went back out on the street again because besides me, none of the others were qualified. So it took them a while to find somebody. And maybe in retrospect, I wish I would have fought it so I could have got that job to get to the environmental job. But what it worked out, I stayed with Booz Allen for 9 years. So I learned so much. It was beautiful. And I got down here in a low cost area and we moved my in-laws here. It was much better for their quality of life. So just a lot of things laid in better. I followed God's plan and I just left. I left it at that.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So I think
I'm
off topic.
The personality assessment that you mentioned earlier, what was that called again?
The DISC personality assessment.
DISC personality assessment. Okay.
Yeah, it's not an acronym. It just stands for the 4 different styles: dominant, influencer, steady, stable, and compliant.
Excellent. Yeah, I know there's a lot of personality assessments out there.
Like 47.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely look into that one there.
And as I go through helping people, this may or may not be a question. I go through helping people figure out what they want to do. I want them to go through some of the standard stuff, right? What are your skill sets? What is it you really enjoy doing? What do you not want to do? Let's look at your personality from several different aspects. I use DISC. Strength Finders is good. Could be even love languages is good. You got to pick some that kind of resonate with them, that they'll pay attention to, and find out more about their personality. So with DISC, if you're a compliant person, you're going to want to do something that's more spreadsheet oriented, more analytical, more written with the rules. I'm an environmental guy. The 40 CFR, Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations has the environmental regulations in it. And they call it the 5-finger regulations because you literally have to put your fingers in and go back and forth reading between the different sections to understand what truly I have to do here to be in compliance. I loved it because I'm a compliant person. That doesn't bother me to dig in and go through it. A D person that's very high level, just wants to get results done, doesn't want to get into the details, that will drive them nuts. So if you try to take a D into that kind of environmental work, it's not going to be a match, right? So I could go around a lot of that. So understanding who they are and what type of jobs do they fit best in is important. It doesn't mean you have to do that. It just means you're going to take less energy to do that. If you're really passionate about environment, but you're a D, maybe you'll be so passionate that you're willing to do this work, and that's okay, right? But it gives you that insight, right? So that's the personality piece, and then I go into experiences. I really want to understand what things they really enjoyed and didn't enjoy. Like me, design, construction, facility maintenance, not what I want to do. Did it, got the ticket, right? Wore this t-shirt. I want to work environmental, emergency management. And I had one story I always tell. Gentleman, he was a meteorologist in the Air Force, and he was going to get out as a lieutenant colonel, prior enlisted. And he says, I do not want to be an Air Force weatherman. I mean, a TV weatherman. I don't want to be a TV weatherman. So I want to do something different. I said, well, tell me a little bit about that. What's driving that, right? And I said, what was the best job? And he goes, oh, working for Lieutenant General Henry on the hurricane disaster oil spill. And he challenged me to use meteorology in a different way, right? Because which way is because it's in the Gulf, right? And the Gulf has different tides. Where's that oil going to go? And then they found there was a hole slick down like 200 feet. Well, tell me a little bit about that. How's meteorology impacting that? When's that going to turn over, right? Where's that going? So he was really using meteorology in a different way. So we got him focused in, and he really started thinking about what he wanted. And he's now a GS-14 with the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA doing exactly that, using meteorology for all the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the floods, to be able to predict what things are going to happen and either get out warnings or help response. And he's loving it. And so I think that was a huge success.
So Donna, I have a question for you. So have you ever come across somebody who may not have the job experience,
yes,
but their passion lies somewhere else and they want to get their foot in that door, but they just don't have the experience to get hired into something like that? What have you ever come across that, and what is your recommendation for that person?
Yes. As soon as you know that, you got to start the process, right? And we always tell people you need to start transitioning 2 years in advance. Like I was saying with my story, man, I started like 24 years in advance because I never had any interest to stay in for a career, but it just fit me. I just kept staying in as part of my personality. So he was a Army senior master sergeant, wanted to 180 degree and get into IT, was passionate about IT, but he didn't have any of the qualifications. Well, because he had started so early, now we could start going through what certifications do you need? Let's go talk to some companies. What kind of job are you looking for? What their requirements going to be? So looking at some typical job ads. And we started laying in a plan for certifications. And the last one that happened just as he was retiring was this big Microsoft Azure training, if I remember right. And it was intensive. It was like 6 weeks long. And it was challenging, but because he was driven, he went through it and he completed it. And he got through a SkillBridge, he got a job where he could show his soft skills capabilities, right? And he had met the requirements to get the IT job. He knew he was going to probably come in at an entry level, but he'd be able to advance quickly. And he was able to put the plan together. Most people don't think about that until the very end, and they don't have time to react.
Yeah. And that's what I found too, is a lot of folks, they want to pivot into something else, but they don't have the job experience. So they just continue doing what they've always known. And it's not where their passion lies. So they lack a sense of purpose when they get into that position, right? But starting early is your recommendation. Start early, identify it probably 2 years before you want to get out of the military, and start looking into that. Maybe walk into your SIX shop or whatever it is, your intel shop, and ask the folks. I had a Marine that did that one time. He wanted to get out. He wanted to do IT similar to the person you mentioned. And he got a exact rundown of what it would take to get your foot in the door in an IT shop on that base, if they were hiring. So networking, asking around, trying to figure things out. I think you hit it on the head, Don. I like that.
Yeah, and you probably have to lower your expectations in front, because you're not going to come in at a manager level.
Right.
Yeah, not unless you really show you got great skills. You're going to come in at a technical entry or technical, maybe even a mid, and you're going to have to learn, and you're going to have to show them.
Yeah, I don't know that I would want to come in as a manager if I'm just learning right off the bat.
Well, there are, we always talk about like senior NCOs, senior officers, you get the universal management degree, we say that about pilots in the Air Force, right? They supposedly go do anything. And I don't mean that derogatory. They've come in, and that's what we do with them, right? They come out of flying, they put them in squadron command, wing commander jobs, and some first, some don't. But it's the same thing on the other side. So as you come up, you can use the same leadership skills in a lot of different areas, and you just rely on your people. But But in today's market, here's a piece that I don't think a lot of military understand. If you're going to get in with a consultant, the consultant is going to have a target client. So Booz Allen, 85% were on government client side. So when they win the contract, they're complying with the government's proposal, request for proposal. And for mine that I did in Florida, 20 people each have to have these criteria, right? So when I put people forward, I had to fit that, bachelor's, 10, 15 years, boom, 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 down the line. If I put in somebody who didn't meet, and put them on site, I would be non-compliant. I did actually bring in an entry-level person, and I sat down with a gentleman. He's the chief master sergeant, used to work for me. Now he was a 14, so I'm now working for him under the contract. And I said, here's a gentleman I want to bring in. This guy has some really neat. I was really impressed with him. I met him at a conference. I've talked to him a number of times. Just really impressed with him. I'd like to introduce him to you. If you think that he would come in, I think he could do a lot of the tasks on this team that are more entry level. And it opened up their eyes, because when they recompeted it 3 years later, they lowered some of the standards because they needed some entry level people in the contract. Right. At that point, when I was bidding, it was all seniors. So I got a waiver to the criteria to be able to bring this guy in. And he did really, really well. But you have to work through that. So I don't think a lot of military understand that process because they've never been in the government contracting process. Mm-hmm. And again, networking, understand what you're getting into. So,
I was watching an interview just the other day with Pharrell Williams and Rick Rubin. So big music producers in the music industry. And they were talking about, and I remember he said something about, and it really resonates with me because that's kind of the way I picture it. I wanted to ask you if you feel like money is a driving factor behind people going down paths that they don't necessarily want to be on. And I'll set the context of that by saying, like, in the interview, and it's also what I think, if you get close enough to the kind of organization or industry or what you actually want to do from a broader perspective, say it's music, for example, if you start to gravitate towards hanging around music production studios, maybe volunteering time, go in and work as an intern, do those kind of things. Of course, you're not going to be making the big money, and you're not going to get that, $1 billion producer sum in your bank account, but you're close enough to it that it gives you the driving passion to be there, regardless if you're working at the top of the industry or not. Do you feel like money is a really contributing factor why people go down these paths of dissatisfaction with job careers and things like that?
100%. And I think it's not just money, it's status, right? I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Impress people you don't like.
Yeah. What does Dave Ramsey say? Impress people at a stoplight, people at a stoplight that you'll never see again. Right? Yeah. I think it's status. We go for, had a lot of people that got out when I was getting out, they wanted the VP position because, lieutenant colonel, you're probably somewhere in that principal VP area. So that's where I want to be. And I thought about that. And I came in as a senior associate. And some people looked at me and said, that's not a very high title. I said, yeah, but my senior associate is going to be kind of like your vice president because you're a much smaller company. You're going to be doing the same thing I'm doing, which is writing proposals and doing business development and managing teams. And they said, yeah, from that perspective, but don't you want the title? And I said, I don't care about the title. Let's compare paychecks. And I was about the same. I said, so what is it to drive me? It's what I want for a position. It pays me what I need. So, I'm gonna go for it. So I think there's sometimes it's money, just get the most money. I talked to another person who was going to get like 300,000, which was twice where I came in, more. And I was like, wow. Now he's traveling and he's earning that money. He's not at home much, and it's a stressful job. It's a small company startup, and he's doing great. So he's worth it to the company, but he's sacrificing a lot. And
is he happy?
He seems to be. We'll see where, because in the middle of it, first couple of years, you can be happy because you're making a lot of success. But what do you?
It'll wear on you.
What are you missing at home? Yeah, how are you balancing it out? So exactly that, Vic. So here's the question, and maybe I'll come back to you guys and then I'll tell you what I do. How do you figure out if the job, the career position, is going to fit into your life? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I think it has to do with work-life balance, right?
It does.
Is it cutting into the important things of my life? And if it is, I need to reevaluate that, because I had a similar situation, and though my position right now pays very well, but it is something that I had to relearn, which I'm okay with, but it is way far from my home. I'm driving almost an hour to get there and an hour back almost. And I like the title. So that exactly what you just mentioned. The title is what kind of, and the money is what drove me there. And now I kind of humbled myself and I thought, do I really need all that? Am I okay with something that's closer, that doesn't cut into my drive, that allows me time with my family? Because my non-negotiable is dropping my son off at school every morning. And a lot of times I wasn't able to do that with this last position, because I had to get on the road early. So now I told my manager, my new supervisor, oncoming supervisor, that is my non-negotiable. As long as I can work with that and you can too, we're okay. I'm going to have no issues. So I think identifying work-life balance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really right along those same lines. Like I turned down, I applied and interviewed for, I don't know, tens of dozens of positions before I got to the point where I found the position and interviewed, and then got finally hired after, a long stretch of paperwork and back and forth meetings and phone calls. But for me, it's really like my position that I do right now, the title, who cares? The position is cool because I get to stay engaged with things that I totally enjoy, which is electronics and things like that, getting my hands in the mix of things. The pay is about half of the pay of any other job that's around me in the area, and also turned down a job that was probably 2 or 3 times the pay, just because of the fact that I didn't want to be in a position in an office with the title that allows them to say, okay, you can take this work home, and then you start down this pattern, and then next thing you know, on the weekends at 7 p.m. you're working on proposals and doing paperwork for your job that's only a 9-to-5 job that's 40 hours a week. I just didn't want any part of that. My job now at whatever 4:35 p.m. I go home, I put the office phone down, I close the laptop, I leave the office, and I go, and I don't think about it until the next morning. And there's no emails, no text messages. I've text messaged my supervisor a couple times at like 7 p.m. or whatever on some random thing just to let them know, and they don't answer me until the next morning.
There you go.
So that's the environment that I want to be in, and then meeting the team and understanding that they're really family oriented, and they kind of create a family-oriented vibe around the team itself and around the whole organization, even though we're spread across the globe. I really, really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, I love it. What you both said, I love it. I think what I do is I help people define a life description. We have a job description. What is it you want in your life, right? How do you build the relationship with your spouse or significant other? How do you build the relationship with your kids? Maybe your parents, where are they at in life, right? Maybe time to spend a little bit of time with them, or maybe you're in a caretaker status with them, right? Maybe you want to be more active in the church or the community. What is it that when you look back, we always talk the deathbed. What is it you look back and say, boy, I wish I would have? Well, then if you were going to wish that you would have, then do it, right? And figure out, like you said, John, here's the parameters. How do I get a job to fit that? And that goes back to my July of 2008, right? Those questions factor in, what do I want my life to look like? I want to be able to get off at 5 or 6. Yeah, I'll work overtime. I worked more all-nighters with Booz Allen in 9 years than I did in the Air Force in 27, I think. I didn't have that. What's saying?
Or at least got paid extra for it.
No. may have factored into my bonus, but I didn't get paid for it. I was on salary. Man. So, it was proposals. I remember burning the midnight oil 2, 3, 4 in the morning with an 8 o'clock briefing on a red team or a blue team, green team, whatever. trying to get it submitted. But my wife was okay with that as long as I would have that flexibility of, hey, if you can work at home, you can do these things, you still get the job done, right? We can go on long weekends, we can take off on trips. I pride myself in 27 years Air Force and 9 years Booz Allen. I never lost any leave. Always took it.
Very good.
I always made sure we were focused on those things. That doesn't mean I didn't work some on travel, right? We're traveling up to Colorado to go to state parks or national parks. I maybe have a document I'm trying to review while the kids are listening to something in the back and the wife's driving. Everybody was okay with that, right? But it allowed me to get away. So we had to talk to the kids and talk to the wife and figure out, how does this all work together? We got a close friend right now who, not to pick on him, but she, the spouse, has kind of said, we're done with the military. You deployed. It was really hard. I don't want to do that again.
Right.
And he's like, okay, we're going to work together and figure out our careers. So he's going to get out at 11 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. Every one of us are different, but you got to have those conversations.
Yeah. Communication is huge. It's huge. I mean, especially with the family. That was a big thing that I encountered as well. And I'm glad you brought that up. Because it was a talk that I had with my wife before I got out. I'm like, are you okay with that? Because she is involved in my life, right? She is part of it. And the idea was, I would allow her to choose where we were going to settle down.
There you go.
Only because she had followed me, her and the family, had followed me for so many years. Everywhere the Marine Corps took me, I'm like, okay, now it's your time. Now I'm going to follow you wherever your job, wherever your career takes you.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of those non-negotiables, right? Like we had to talk about it. We had to get on the same page. And now I'm supporting her career. But lucky enough, I was able to find my own thing here. But it is what it is. You have to have that conversation, especially in a marriage.
That's right. Yes, it's not all about me, right? It's not all about you. It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, John's doing it right.
That's right. It's all about us, right? Dave Ramsey says the day you get married, you combine everything. You combine your bank accounts, your checking accounts, right?
Yeah.
Not my money and her money or his money. It's
ours.
It's our money. It's our life, and how are we going to do this? And
I've encountered so many people who. I listen to Dave Ramsey as well, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It becomes ours, right? And I've talked to so many people who have like their expenses separate. They don't talk about it, and I find that those, at least the people that I know in those situations, it just causes so much issue when it comes to it, because now they're spending their money here, they're spending their money here. There's no communication in the middle, so it just causes so much issues. Just combine it. Why not?
Yep. Yeah, when we were captains, we deployed to Turkey and then to Iraq. This was 91. Desert Storm, and then Provide Comfort. And my fellow captain, they had their finances separate, and he had bills he paid, and she had bills she paid, and she would send his bills via APO mail down into Turkey so he could write the check and send them off. And it was 2 weeks to get down to him and 2 weeks to get back to the U.S. and they were getting late charges, and it's like, ouch.
Sounds like a mess. Yeah, it sounds like a mess.
My wife actually talked to her and said, "Is there a reason that you couldn't just pay those?" She goes, "They're his bills." "Yeah, but you've got access to his account, right?" He says, "Yeah, but there's his bills." It's like, okay.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, exactly. That doesn't make any sense to me.
My wife and I worked out. He said, if I deploy, so we were civil engineers is on 24-hour notice most of my career. You could go anywhere within 24-hour notice. So we just worked out that I'm going to have in my bag. I have a checkbook, and I know that on day one I have $100, and every paycheck I will get another 100. Now this was back in early 90s, right? So maybe it's more now, but I knew exactly how much money I had. So if I was there and needed to buy something that was neat, rugs, you get down to Turkey, rugs, jade, leather jackets, I just had to call her up and say, hey, I need a little bit more money, and she would work it out. But other than that, she took care of it all. and which gave me freedom down there. Probably put a little bit more stress on her, but she also didn't. She already did that. She just loved managing the finances. Now that we're retired, she's thinking maybe you need to take this on. so we're having that conversation. But she did it for 40 years. We've been married 42 years. And I almost screwed it up a number of times, going back to our previous conversation of not, I was trying to get promoted and I was putting in the hours. I was working the late. One summer we had this, they call it the Triple R Olympics, Rapid Runway Repair Olympics. So it was all the different skills having to do with the rapid runway repair. And I led the team all summer long. Well, my boss also said I still had to get my regular job done. So I'm working like 14, 16 hours a day, trying to lean on my senior NCOs and stuff. But my wife, at the end of that, she was like, never again. That was hard. And there's little kids at home, right? We just had a baby a year or so before that. That was hard. And she just about walked out the door. So I had to really start thinking about what's important to me here. And I set a goal that I'm gonna retire from the Air Force married to the same woman. So
that is a heck of a goal, man. That's a good one.
When I was a group commander, I still made it home for dinner every night. I still may go upstairs and work email later, but I made it home for dinner. And if we were going to do activities, we would go out to a show, we would do whatever she wanted to do, nights and weekends, we would go do it. And I wouldn't spend all weekend and all nights in the office, which my predecessor had done. He had worked 6 a.m. till 10 p.m, Monday through Saturday, and from after church on Sunday, noon to 6 or 8. And he got promoted. He got to be a wing commander, but that was not what I wanted to do. My secretary tried to convince me one day that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
So Don, I'm curious what your calendar looks like. You don't have to show it to us, obviously, right? But I'm curious, like, how do you carve out time for all these things? It seems like you do a whole lot, from your, your job to, your business, taking care of folks. I'm sure you have client lists and people that you work with. I'm curious, like, what does your calendar look like? Do you carve out time, like, for yourself, family time? Is that all in your calendar at all?
It's a constant fluctuating calendar. You're exactly right. But I have to put all that in, and I put it all in the same calendar. So my wife and I, we want to do a date night on Monday nights. I put that in. So I block that. Tuesday night, I have an investing class and a Bible study class. I put that in, right? So I put in those key life things that I want to do. I put in my medical appointments. 65, man, you get way too many. I'm going through a whole bunch, but you got to put those in, right?
Yeah.
And then what I found I had to do, because I started doing client meetings all day, and I never had time, because you have to not only work in the business, you have to work on the business, right? And if I'm not spending time on what's my mission, my purpose, my goals, educating myself, all those bigger picture things, then I cannot satisfy my clients. So I had to have that kind of time. So I said, because we love long weekends for camping, right. So especially from October to April, we're out at least once a month, if not twice a month, about 3-4 day weekends. So I kind of blocked Monday and Friday is my time, right? It may be camping time. It may be in my office working on my stuff time, but it's my time. My client meetings are Tuesday through Thursday afternoons. Tuesday through Thursday mornings are, again, my time, right? And that may be a networking meeting. That may be just me working, developing this course. So I block that out. And so I'm not just letting people get on my schedule. And then when I get into LinkedIn and somebody sends me a note and says, hey, I think we got a lot of commonality. Let's have a 15-minute meeting. Explain to me what we're going to talk about. Explain to me what the purpose is, right? I can't give 15 minutes to everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm having to say no. I say, well, I think you might have some people that I know. Well, tell me what you do in LinkedIn, a message here, and then we'll go from there. Because if you get them on the phone, 15 becomes 30.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I've had to become a hawk on the schedule. And because I'm involved I was on a board and I was teaching a leadership program, I had to factor that in, right? So every month, I have an accountability group. And every month we sit down and we say, what are we going to be accountable to this month? And then I've to do it, like for November, I had to go through and say, wow, I think I want to do about 4 or 5 networking meetings to connect with people, potential clients, et cetera.
Right.
I had 18 networking meetings in the schedule.
Wow.
And I started having to say, no, don't that. I've never gotten anything out of that one, never got anything out of that one. That's not my target group. This is really what I need to be in. I came down to 6, and that's what I did. And I followed up with people after that and had one-on-ones with those kind of people, and that became beneficial. So I had to be really intentional and purposeful to make that work. And it worked for me. For my course, I'm trying to do 2 hours a day on the course. And I came down the last day and I had to do 2.5 hours. It was on a weekend. But for my accountability group, we put $100 on the table, $50 to each person. Yeah. And if you don't meet it, you owe them the money. And it's amazing how $50 and $100 isn't a lot of money, but it's enough to say, I think I have to stay up a little late tonight to get this done. Yeah.
You know, I love that you said that, being intentional with your time.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I'm sure John gets these as well. You know, we get messages. Hey, let's talk for a little bit. I'm like, what are we talking about? You know, give me some information first. Let's talk about it on text, on the message, and then we can get on the phone after. But, you know, time is precious. And I'm one, and I don't know if you do this, John or Don, but I carve out my white space. I carve out, you know, in the calendar. My calendar looks like a pack of Skittles. You know, my Google calendar. There's time for family time. You know, from this hour this hour. Phones are down. We all play, you know, either board games or we watch a movie or something like that. There's time to, you know, read. There's time for exercise. Like, if I don't put it on my calendar, because that's how I've been working for so long in the military. If it doesn't go on my calendar, it doesn't happen. And I'm just kind of sitting there like a freaking floating amoeba, just figuring out what the heck I'm going to do next, you know, or I hate just taking this and scrolling on the phone all day, because that's not productive.
That's right.
Yeah. So
you'll appreciate this. As I was with Booz Allen, I was on a job where I was traveling 90% of the time. In fact, I had apartments up in Amarillo and then up at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, different times, but I was spending a lot of time up there, and I was traveling every week, probably 6 out of every 7 weeks I was on the road. And my wife said, I'd really like to get theater tickets to 6 plays. And I said, do it. She goes, but you're never home. I said, just pick the date. Just pick a time. How about Friday nights? Okay. And she goes, but again, you always could be not here. I said, I will make a commitment to do everything I possibly can to be there on that date, because it's important to you. And it was interesting. The very first Friday night, I'm in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and my boss comes in Thursday morning and says, hey, I want to have an offsite meeting with all the team tomorrow, because the government contractor on site they're off. They just work Monday through Thursday, off on Friday. So we would work part of the day on Friday. And I said, sir, got a problem. I got a date tomorrow night with my wife. You know, I'm going home tonight. He goes, no problem. Can you be on the phone? I said, oh yeah, 100%. I'll be on the phone all day. It's great. And I had some people come up to me afterward and said, you're not very committed to this team if you're not willing to change your schedule. And because you can leave here at 1:00 on Friday and still make it for the show at 6. I said, no, I've tried that a number of times and it's not always worked. You know, aircraft get delayed. They have problems, weather. I said, no, this is important to me. If I have to resign from this team, then that is where my priority is. And sure enough, everybody finally understood it. Boss was fine with it. And I made it home. And we did for 4 or 5 years. We had 6 shows a year on Friday nights.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So I was turning around and I was looking for a book, Intentional Living by John Maxwell. And he had just written it when I joined the team in 2015. It was my first book that I read. And I just really took that to heart of, you just got to be so intentional with your time, with your focus, you know, relationships. I had to step out of a partnership. Started it the month of COVID when it started, March of 2020. 3 years later, March of 23, we weren't meshing. We were going in different directions. And for my health, I had to say goodbye to that. And we didn't have an agreement on how we were going to disband or leave or anything. So I just said, instead of getting into this long legal debate, argument with them, I'm just going to step away. And I did. And boy,
and being retired, it gives you that flexibility to do that.
That's right.
That's the beauty of it.
My resting heart rate had gone from 53 to 65, and when I left, it went right back down to 55.
Nice.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. and I was starting to sleep better because I was waking up in the middle of the night, almost in like a nightmare, conversations, frustrations. And I was like, that all went away. And I was like, that was exactly the right decision. But I had struggled with it for a year because I really liked what we were doing. The purpose was there, but it was the wrong person that I was in relationship with. And he was having problems himself. He finally told me that. And I said, dude, if we're both struggling with this, it's time to say goodbye. We're not helping each other. It's not worth it. So that was a tough decision. Sometimes you have to do that. Have you guys had to make a decision like that?
Yeah, I have. I mean, maybe not so drastic, but I definitely align exactly with that first part of what you were saying. Like, just literally coming onto the job like a weekend, and then I think it was a week or 2 weeks in. It was really, really early into the job, just this year, the job that just started. And one of the first things they said was like, "Hey, we're going to send you to Naples for a couple weeks because we have this thing going on and we need you to be there." And I immediately text my supervisor and I was like, "Hey, that's great, and I'm down for doing it, and I'm ready to get started and get into the job and get going." I was like, "But my anniversary is on this day, and I'm definitely not flying out that weekend to go show up to Naples on whatever day it is. So sorry if that's a problem, but I just need to let you know that up front. Like that's my priority, period. I understand I just started and I'm the new guy and blah, 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 but that's where I draw the line." And she was like, "No, that's absolutely correct and commendable. Like you should be thinking about that. And I'm glad you let me know," and just fly in, a few days later or whatever.
Yeah. And those are the things we should be researching about the company, right? What are their policies about that? We tend not to do it. I think one of you said earlier on, you get into an interview, you're answering all their questions. Hopefully you're articulating all about you, so you show the best, but you should be asking questions to them. What's your work-life balance? How do you factor in family, right? All those different things are important to you. For me, it was, how do I develop my team? How do you help me develop my team, right? And Booz Allen had a 360-degree assessment process, and we talked about it. I was like, yes, it's not just a pencil whip assessment fit rip report, right? That everybody walks on water, nails Jello to the wall, and then we go from there for the next year. It was we developed specific actions that people had to work on, and every month you had to get together and show your progress on those, and you had to help them, and I just loved it, and so those things were important to me. So we got to figure those out.
So when I walked into this interview that I recently did, I had this mindset that I was actually interviewing them to see if they were the correct fit for me. So I've done a couple of interviews, and a few of them were just, it seems like they were just work. Hey, here's what you can do. And, I didn't even bother to ask about work-life balance because I knew like that's what it was like. And these are like civilian companies, private organizations. But this one that I applied to, I went into it thinking, okay, let me switch it up a little bit. Let me switch my mindset up a little bit. Let me ask them questions about these things because I want to see if they're a good fit for me. I'm interviewing them to see if they fit into my life. And sure enough, it sounds like they did. So I ultimately, ended up going with them. Yeah, but I like what you mentioned. Like, you actually, see if it's a good fit for you because you don't want it to bleed into, your personal life. Like you mentioned, your theater with your wife. That's a non-negotiable for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let me ask one question. The name of your podcast is Military Retirement.
That's right.
Podcast. Yeah. And I don't think it's just retirement out of the military. We've talked a lot about that in that transition piece. But there's also that endpoint where you're retired. That's
right. Yeah. So I'm currently attempting to set up something for that. I like I mentioned to John before, I'm a big fan of the TSP. I've always contributed to the TSP. I'm always checking it for whatever reason. It's kind of like my daily thing. Oh, let me see where it is now. But yeah, it's going to happen, at some point in time. I mean, I'm 41. At some point in time, I'm going to hit that retirement age, and I need to know that things are going to be okay. So it's kind of like you mentioned, you've been, I think it was like 24 years you've been prepping for retirement, as you know, even in the military, even as active duty, like you're prepping for that future retirement, not just your military retirement. That's why they have the TSP. I'm always looking into that, only because I want to make sure that I have everything in line for me to actually live my life, you know, with my family, my wife, when the time comes.
I mean, Don, what do you see? You're closer to the retirement age than we are, obviously. Not much closer, but a little bit closer than we are. And you've got a lot more.
I am 65 now, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot more experience under your belt as well. And since you brought up the question, I want to ask you, like, when you think about retirement, like being done with work, what does that actually mean for you? Like, how do you picture that in your mind? Because my idea of retirement I don't really ever see myself stopping working, and it depends on how you define work, right? But I don't see myself just dropping everything and going to the beach and picking up a margarita or a Mai Tai and sitting there, twiddling my flip-flops around my fingers while I'm watching the birds fly by.
Is that what you do, John? Is that what you do?
No, never in my life. Not once, not never.
I think it's important what you just talked about is just like for the job, right? We went through the discussion about what is it I want to do next coming out of the military? What do I want my life to look like? I think you play that same thing. At some point, I want to retire. Maybe it's 55, 60, 65. And all that really means is I'm going to step away from this job, or I'm going to go part-time, right? Or like for me, my focus is 24 to 32 hour week in my own company, setting my time. So we went on a 31-day vacation this summer. We drove the camper all the way from San Antonio up to Toronto, back through Michigan and Nebraska and home. So it's 5,100 miles. That's what we wanted to do. We were bird watching, we were hiking, we were sitting by the campfire, we were seeing friends. I met with a couple of bosses of mine who were my mentors, saying thank you. I mean, they're getting up in age. I just wanted to show appreciation for them. I met with some friends from Army War College. I was an Air Force guy at Army War College. We met with some of them. We were supposed to be in Asheville, North Carolina, but a couple of weeks after that big flood, so we didn't get to go. But so opportunities, I'm taking different trips to go see them, and just, it was 22 years ago, and it just feels like yesterday when we left. We still stay in touch. We still send Christmas cards, and we're always talking. So that's what I set my mind on what I wanted in retirement. But I think I'm the same with you, John, is I don't think I'm going to walk away from significant work, right? I still want to help people in transition. I'm probably getting, at some point I lose that connection age-wise, right? Because they're 40 years old now. I'm 65. What does he know? So there's a generation gap.
Oh, no. Never that. That doesn't cross my mind. If anything, you're the sage. You're here to spit wisdom to us, if anything.
Yeah. Some people are each way, right? So I'll work with the people that want to work with me, and I'll give them everything I can. So, and I'm almost to the point where, it really doesn't matter about the money. My wife has told me that a number of times. You're set financially. Just help people. Right? So I'm on several boards and stuff like that. But the point being is I sat down with what's important to me, right? What's important to me is spending time with the grandkids and my kids and my wife and my friends and helping people in career transition. How do I balance that off? And I'm still on several boards. So I was the board chair for the Red Cross in San Antonio as we went into COVID for that first 4 or 5 months still. So that giving back was important to me because I'm an emergency management guy. So I think we all have to keep an eye on where we're going and what is that financially going to cost, right? Because I'm glad you said Vic TSP, but how much do you put in? There's some people say 10%, some people say 15%. There's a lot of younger people, generations 20, 30s that are struggling to get anything into savings. And the power of compounding is you got to start early, and it runs. The month my wife and I got married in 1982, I just graduated college. In fact, I was still in college. She started contributing to a traditional IRA. And I was like, dear, what are you doing? $10 isn't going to make any difference. He goes, oh, yes, it will.
Yep.
It did.
Interesting.
And start early and get out of the G fund. That's what I learned.
That's right. So, but you got to have a thought about what it is you want to do. Because I think too many people, same thing. They get to that last day of a job, or they get laid off and they're 63, 64. They didn't want to retire, but they can't get that next job. They get forced into a retirement. They haven't prepped themselves and think about what they want to do. So it's all, you can tell I'm a planner. It's all about creating the next plan, right? Where am I going?
That's it. Go ahead, John.
It's funny you say that. And I think I am a planner as well. Like maybe not meticulously on paper and charting and keeping track of things along the way, but I'm always my brain is always turning. And I think it's really the reason why I started down this path of this YouTube channel and started to do some of this, putting out information about military retirement and transitioning out of the military and things like that. And then it turned into this podcast and what we're doing currently. And I'm sure it's going to evolve over time, but really I think like what I'm doing now is what I don't realize about it, and kind of just going at it blindly as much as possible, is that this is going to turn into my retirement kind of ish job in some way. And I'm just building the building blocks of it now so that whenever it does start to take off or do its thing, like it's established and I can continue to do that. And again, like we're not going to make money off of this thing ever. I don't think. It's not like we're going to go buy a Lamborghini tomorrow making money off of this podcast. It's not going to happen. Just to let you know, Vic, that's not going to happen. But really just building the community and building a resource for people is really, I mean, it's kind of what I've always done in the military, unknowingly or knowingly. And so this here, I'm also a member of a board member for a couple things as well. And I think just that whole giving back, because it's like you're taking the whole time, maybe not taking, but you're taking on information, taking on knowledge all your way up through your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And then at some point you flip the pyramid upside down and you start to give back as much as possible. And then that intrinsically just gives you value through knowing that you're doing kindness, knowing that you're putting good things out into the world.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah.
It feels good to give back. It really does. I mean, you've acquired so much knowledge over the lifetime, right? Whether in the military or whether, even after, like Don, I mean, you've acquired so much information. What do you do with that? You don't just take it with you. You got to pass it on to the next generation.
John Maxwell says, be a river, not a reservoir. Always be passing your information on and learning more. I mean, you're always, some's coming in, you're learning, you're questioning your principles, you're changing things around, you're getting it back out. Like one I'm really trying to explore lately is, what is it about losing our purpose when we leave the military? How do we help prevent that? And I really have been thinking into a lot of that and trying to talk to some folks. I don't know that I have an answer. I don't know if you guys have any input there, but I get, we're working on something bigger than ourselves and we're giving back and we're serving. But all of a sudden, when we walk out, it's like we didn't have a plan for what we were going to do and we just get lost. And I think, again, when you hit the retirement piece, all of a sudden, if you haven't thought about it, boom, I lost my purpose again. And how many people die within the first couple of years of retirement? Because they just start sitting in front of the TV and they don't have someplace to go and people to relate to. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on losing your purpose.
That's a tough one. I think you need a lot of folks don't have it identified yet when they retire. Like I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but then actual life starts happening. Like, hey, look, I might actually need to pay for my mortgage, so let me just jump into something that'll pay the bills, and then that kind of that starts taking over, and you start losing your sense there. What you wanted to do, but you thought was a nice idea, now turns into, hey, look, let me put this on the back burner, and let me actually do whatever just to pay the bills. So I think it needs to be, you need to identify the purpose and actually make that a priority to pursue that and not let anything else take precedence before that. I mean, I was kind of in the same boat. Like I just wanted to, I sat, when I was on terminal leave, I sat at Balboa Park in downtown San Diego for about a month or two. And I sat there and I just drew portraits of people because I like to draw. And that's what I wanted to do. I was like, man, if I could get paid for this, I would love to do that, you know? So I jumped on an organization where I became an art instructor.
There you go.
But then I'm like, okay, well, it didn't pay a lot. I just enjoyed doing that. But then I ended up putting that on the back burner and then jumped on with this DOD contractor position because that actually, like, you know, maintained my lifestyle that I was used to. Now I'm kind of wishing like, hey, I wish I would have explored that a little bit more and just sat there and drew portraits for free. Really, I was doing it. So I think you need to identify the purpose and then just move forward with that and not let anything else take precedence.
And there can be stepping stones, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'm doing this, but I'm starting to build this skill, starting to develop this. Maybe it becomes a what do they call it? From a hobby to a gig business.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? You just slowly start working it. John, you were going to say something.
No, I was actually thinking about what both of you just said, and I wrote down a note here that was actually going to be a question, but I think it's going to turn into more of an answer. Like, the question that I wrote down was, does being involved in your passion allow you to disconnect emotionally from the work without worrying about that disconnection? And so to your point about the passion thing, I don't think you lose your purpose when you leave the military. I think you lose the camaraderie. I think you lose the fellowship of being around people that you've been around for many years. I think what the disconnect from my perspective anyway is if you've got that passion, and that's a passion that transcends decades, right? So if you've been in the military for 20 years and you're retiring 20 plus years or whatever, there's something along those 20 years and maybe additionally whatever years through college and high school before that, before you join the military, that you've always done, that you've always had a passion for, and you never really fully realized that passion. So say it's working on cars on the weekends, or tuning engines, or doing artwork, sketching, drawing, painting, using some sort of medium to create artwork. I think what the issue is we put these imaginary timelines on realizing our passions and realizing our purposes. And those imaginary timelines don't really matter because sometimes it takes you the 50 plus Stephen Pressfield years to get your first book out and get it published, even though you've been writing for 30 of those years and not getting anything published. Sometimes you take the Justin Bieber route and you put a couple of songs on the internet and then you become an overnight sensation. I mean, granted, he's been doing music for a decade before that, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the perception of it. And especially nowadays in this kind of TikTok era and the short video era and everything on demand, I think people put that same kind of timeline on their passions and their purpose. And I don't think people realize that sometimes it just takes a lot longer than you expect. And it takes constant effort. And just as a side note to that, like the same thing you mentioned before with your spouse, with your children, with your grandchildren, like that, those relationships take constant effort daily, right? You don't get to take it. I mean, you can take a day off, but you don't get to take like a week off from working on your relationship with your spouse. And I don't think you should do that with working on your relationship with your passion or your purpose as well.
Oh, well said. Well said. I like that. I just got my first co-authored book out in, I don't have a copy with me. I'll show it, but it's Moments That Matter. I wrote a chapter. So we did it as part of an executive book review. And then I wrote another chapter, but ended up not going with that person to put it in her book. So I just wrote myself a note to pull that out and make myself even a little, build that out to a book on Amazon. And I've got another one that I'm thinking. So all of a sudden now, books, it's like what you said, you got stuff to say. That's why John Maxwell got into writing the books. He says, I can reach a whole lot more people writing books than I can speaking.
Exactly.
So Don, Moments That Matter, where can we find that book?
I think it's on Amazon.
Very good. Very good.
I'm looking right now. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, I might have to pick it up.
I can always, and it's mine is that story about the weight. just about being kicked out, and then having to really think about, and now there's been months since I've written it, I probably would have finished it a little bit differently.
That's what we're talking about.
Nope, it's more of a green.
Okay. Give me 2 seconds. I'll find it.
If you, I don't know if you put my name in, if it's going to do it.
So, John, from what you mentioned, I wrote this down, that purpose and passion doesn't automatically need to happen immediately after military retirement. It can take some time.
Yeah.
Right? Like people, I think we have too high of expectations about that. Like right after I get out, I need to be doing exactly what I want to be doing. It could take time. That's why you have that. You are retired now. You can take the time to actually explore what you are passionate about. Maybe bring up an old hobby. Maybe try something else. I have a friend of mine who's a retired Master Gunnery Sergeant, E9, and he bought a catamaran. They went sailing around the Pacific, and he also took up photography. He took a photography class because he's always loved photography, and that's his passion. He takes awesome photos too. So it's just like he just started tapping into what he loves, and then just went from there. It didn't happen right after he retired. He just started taking classes, started working on it, and then all of a sudden, let's go sailing, let's go taking photos. So
and he didn't become a master photographer overnight, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's been taking photos for many years, but he learned it after the fact, right? Like fully on via the class, he learned it after. Oh, there we go. Moments that matter.
That's the book right there. Yep.
Excellent.
What's fun is in the book Intentional Living, John challenged us to think back to the stories that you have in your life, things that have shaped your thinking and your values and stuff like that. So I was sitting, I had an apartment in Amarillo, Texas. I was there for a Sunday church, and I went to Slosky's after church. And I was sitting there for lunch. So I exactly remember where I was. It just snowed the night before, and I can give you the whole. And I'm finishing the book, and it says, think about the stories. And I thought, how would you do that? And I just pulled out a couple of sheets of paper, just like this. And they were folded. And I just started writing. What was my story in first grade, second grade? And I just wrote first grade and just had a couple thoughts, second grade. Went all the way through my military assignments. I went through different jobs I've had. And now I've got 4 pages of just bullet ideas of stories. And I go back periodically because now I put those back into my long-term, short-term memory, right? The long-term memory. I was like, that might be a great story. That's where the weight story came out of. That's where so many other stories that I do in career transition have come out of, is just sitting back and thinking about it. So intentionally thinking. And we were about a year later, I was at one of the next conferences with John, and we were in this executive session with John. I had about 200 of us. So it was the returning alumni. And this young lady stood up and said, John, your stories aren't resonating with my crowd. And he said, because they're my stories. You need your stories. And she said, well, I don't have any stories. And I jumped on Facebook that right then because we had a private group. And I said, guys, this is what I did. Go back to John's book, page this. This is the challenge. And this is what I did. And everybody's like, wow. How did you know how to do that? I said, I didn't. I just tried something, right? But I just created a list. And I said, you will find when you do something like that you have tons of stories. And when you think into them, it's what shaped your life. So as I developed that weight story, we finished today on that story with, I had to make a commitment right then. Am I going to stay or am I going to go? And that developed a commitment on a decision that I could now take forward into my other things. When times got tough, it's like, dude, you stayed in the Air Force. You lost 8 pounds overnight. You're committed to this. Knuckle down. This is what you have to do. And I would create a plan and I would make it happen. Right? And then get through that stressful situation, get through that, whatever it was. And I just know it's the confidence piece, and it's the story that I can rely on. And there's so many of those, like the gentleman when I was given the Article 15, we were talking about weight, right? Just building that relationship. wasn't so much about punishing him. It was about the relationship. And how can I still help you? Even though you're like one step away from being moved out of the Air Force, how can I invest in you to change the trajectory of your life? And
Man, that's powerful. Yeah,
that's what I
like
do.
that. I like that.
So
Don, where can, if people wanted to reach out to you, or people who are listening, where could they find you online? What are your socials?
still the best way is on LinkedIn. Don with the middle initial L, Gleason, Gleason, just like Jackie. I'm the only one with Don with the middle initial L, and let people know that you listen to me here on Military Retirement Podcast, and I'll give you 30 minutes complimentary. Let's just get together and talk about what's on your mind. Doesn't have to lead into anything. It's just I want to pour into and help your audience with something they're thinking about. Maybe you have a question about this. Anything we've talked about, maybe even into retirement. How do you do this? Whatever it is. And let's just sit down and talk.
That sounds like a hell of a deal, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
And I'll fit that in. And I've got I'll give you, there's a guide that I have that I can give you for posting with this is how to target a resume. It's about a 5 or 6 page. It's what I'm building my course on, but it's the real gist of it. So if you're in there trying to figure out what does Don really mean on targeting a resume, I'll give you that, and people can click on that. It's free, and you will give me your email and stuff, right? The name and email.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can always unsubscribe, so it's not a
That's right.
long-term commitment.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And even though I get emails every day from people I never asked to be on their list, I work really hard not to spam people. Somebody wants off the list, they're off the list.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. But you still get the guide.
You have to take the guide no matter what.
Yeah, and I do have a LinkedIn page called Achieve New Heights, my company business page, and I'm trying to be on there 4 or 5 times a week, and just continue to download resources. Talking a lot about military spouses, veterans, career transition. I'm trying to think of the one I put on there at 6:30 this morning. It's not in my head. But
Awesome. Well, John, unless you have something else, I want to thank you, Don, for coming on the Military Retirement Podcast, spreading all this knowledge and wealth. I mean, I have probably 2 full pages of notes from things that you have talked about here. And I'll definitely be looking into your book, Moments That Matter, because I think it resonated with me, and I really want to dive deep into that. So Don, from me, I really do appreciate you coming on.
oh, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks for reaching out, and
You bet.
thank you for the short term, linking up and doing this. I'm really glad it worked out. And
I'm too.
if you ever want to come back on the show again, you want to dive into a specific topic, or if you just want to come hang out with us again, just let us know. And
Okay.
you're always welcome, man. Always welcome. Appreciate you.
Be great. I'll definitely want to follow you guys and participate in your social media, and I'd love to have another opportunity. Yeah, and when you said the other day, sometimes you go an hour and a half to 2 hours, I was like, there's no way we'll do that. And here we are at 2 hours and 15 minutes.
It happens. I mean, the conversation just flows. You're spitting
That's
out
right.
great information, some wisdom, for the masses.
Mhm.
It just happens.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love it.
Yeah, and what I love is a conversation, because you guys were given a lot of good stuff too in your specific application. So
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So thank you very much, and wish you guys a fantastic Merry Christmas.
Oh, you as well.
And I hope you guys are able to take some time off and enjoy it. And congratulations on the new job, Vic. And
Thank you very much.
Both of you for your careers and retirement, and appreciate your service.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Bye-bye.
See you later, Don.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Man, that was a great conversation, dude. It was Don is definitely somebody who I'm going to keep in my pocket here to reach out to as time goes on, because it is tough after you leave the military to find your next passion, your next purpose, right? And it might not be immediately right after you leave. It might take some time. You might have to work, or you might find that you're working in different places and doing different things, and things might not work out for you. So you're just navigating that. And I think that's just part of life. You're just navigating to to different things to see what fits in. And I think, Don opened up my mind to a lot of different things. I'm definitely going to be looking at the DISC personality assessment, like he mentioned, looking at his book, Moments That Matter, and I think he mentioned something about the job description and the life description. That kind of that resonated with me. So I'm definitely going to do a deep dive on what he talked about today.
Yeah, it's really, and nobody believes me when I tell them. It's like, yeah, we might be on for an hour, maybe 2 hours. It just depends. Everybody's like, there's no way. Everybody
Dude,
says that. There's
it's
no way.
great, man. Yeah, it's great. And sometimes, like, I put it in my own calendar. Okay, we're going to be on for an hour,
Right.
but I don't really schedule anything after that. I'm like, oh, well, I mean, if it goes to 2 hours, it goes to 2 hours. If it goes to 3 hours, whatever, the conversation is just good. I mean, and I wanted to keep going, especially when I'm learning something,
No, I mean, it goes right back to the key thing that Don had mentioned in the very beginning about building relationships. And I think we capped off the conversation with that same sentiment of building relationships with people. Like we're not here for quick Q&A, rapid fire questions. We're here to build relationships, and out of those relationships, build better sets of information for people out there who are trying to navigate the civilian life after the military and get things at least started on the right foot, so they don't have to go out there naked and alone and in the cold.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. Well, I once again, it's been another great week talking to you, John, and sharing some great information with you. I'm curious to see who we're going to come up with next. I think we have a podcast going tomorrow. Is it a live stream? It's a live stream, isn't it?
Yeah. So we got back to back. We're doing a double header. So tomorrow we're doing another live stream. Tomorrow evening, my time, which would be tomorrow afternoon. I guess your time. I think it's 3:30 Eastern time. It's already posted out there. We are going to be sitting down with the producer of the Office Joe show, which is a new show that's got released on Amazon and a couple other places. It's basically like The Office meets the military transition. So definitely right up the alley, definitely aligns, I think, perfectly with the audience here, with everybody listening and watching. And if you haven't checked it out, we'll definitely be talking about it tomorrow. You want to come hang out with us and ask questions to the producer or any other questions, we'll be there. So double header.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun time, man. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And I mean, if you're still listening, you can find us every Sunday around this time, around 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're doing a live broadcast on, Facebook, on YouTube, on the Military Retirement Podcast channel, on the Green Logbook, and also on LinkedIn, right? We're also on LinkedIn.
Yep. LinkedIn as well.
Yep. You can find our book on Amazon, Bottom Line Up Front, What You Need to Know Before You Leave the Military. You can find us on Facebook, the Military Retirement Group. I think we're at 2,300 strong in that group. So shout out to all the folks out there who are engaging and asking questions and sharing the wealth to anybody else, all the other veterans in active duty who are soon to be retired. And you can also find me. I have my own personal channel on YouTube, the Green Logbook, just sharing some information on basically a journal on life after the military. So with that, John, another successful live stream on Sunday, and we will be back here tomorrow with Nick from the Office Joe TV show. Actually, I need to do some research and watch some TV shows now. So
I'm a few episodes in. I haven't finished it. I might have to binge it before tomorrow evening.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to do the same. Office Joe. Here we go.
Cool, man. All right, everybody. Thank you. Again, if you want to support us, like, subscribe, hit the buttons, drop us some chats, ask questions, all those good things. Until tomorrow, I guess we'll see y'all tomorrow.
All right. Out here.
Out here.